A journey to one Africa.
Good morning, Mr. President. We'd like to welcome you warmly to the Pan-African Youth Conference. My name is Anne Mazimhaka, and I will be moderating the session this morning. You may have a seat.
The chairperson of the forum. What's your name?
Anne Mazimhaka.
Mazimhaka.
Yes.
That's very simple. The honorable ministers and the delegates. I don't know the theme of the conference. You said the theme was Beyond Liberation Movement. That's what you said?
Beyond movements shaping our future.
Okay. But it doesn't matter from which angle I tackle this subject, because it is a subject which I know well. Two years ago, Uganda was celebrating 50 years of independence. On that occasion, I gave what they called a Jubilee lecture, meaning 50 years of Uganda's independence. Now, in that lecture, which was captured in a small booklet here, I identified what I called 10 strategic bottlenecks. Now, what you are talking about are some of the bottlenecks. But the bottlenecks which I have identified are 10. Now, I will not go through them, all of them, today because it will take a long time, but they are in this booklet. And I think it addresses that question of what needs to be done after liberation. But before I talk about the 10 bottlenecks, there is a process in biology. It is called metamorphosis. This is a process where insects metamorphose from one form of life to another one, from egg to caterpillar to pupa to mature butterfly, in the case of butterflies. But other insects also metamorphose in different ways. In the same way, all of you must know that society, if it is to remain healthy, must metamorphose. Europe has metamorphosed. If, for instance, you go to the time of the French Revolution, 1789, which some of you must have studied, you will see that at that time, France and Europe was divided into 4 social classes. Class number 1 were the feudalists. Feudalists is a social group who live in a certain way and are sustained by taking rent from the tenants. That's how the feudalists live. The feudalists lived by taking rent from the peasants who were staying on their land. Then the second group were, in the French language, they were calling them the bourgeoisie, or the middle class. Now, the middle class were living on different diet. They were being sustained by profit. Profit is the difference between the cost of a product, what it takes you to produce a product, and the price at which you sell that product. The difference is called profit. Now, the bourgeoisie live on profits. If they don't make profits, they will decline as bourgeoisie and become something else. Now, at that time, the third class, which was emerging, was the industrial working class. In the French language, they were called the proletariat. Those ones depended on wages. They don't depend on profit because they are not owners of means of production, but they depend on selling their labor and being paid for that labor. Then the final group were the peasants. These were the people who were on the land, and those ones depended on their sweat minus what the landlords took. That's how the society was organized in France in 1789. If you go to France now, you'll not find some of those groups there. They are no longer there. The feudalists are no longer there. The peasants are no longer there. The society has metamorphosed. The French society is now comprised of the middle class and a skilled working class. That is the metamorphosis that has taken place in Europe. Now, the problem of Africa, which you must address, I hope when you talk of preserving culture, you also do not include preserving the peasants. Because if that's what you are talking about, then you need to rethink what you are talking about. So therefore, the society must metamorphose. But what the minister was saying, the process of metamorphosis must be done independently, not depending on exactly how the other one did it. You must not do it in the same way. No. The metamorphosis must be there, but it should be done independently according to the concrete conditions of each society. But the metamorphosis must be there. Because sometimes there's confusion on that. Some people think that preserving means preserving underdevelopment. No, the society must change so that we have a new modern structure of society. Now, coming back to the strategic bottlenecks, the first one, which I pointed out in this booklet, was ideological disorientation. In your presentation of yesterday by Ms. Mazimpaka, you pointed out that there should be a generational partnership. That's ordinary common sense. That the old must cooperate with the young and the young must cooperate with the old. You have avoided what I've been observing in some of the meetings in the African Union. Some of the youth have been confusing biology with ideology. You hear them saying, we are young, we are young, we are young, we are young. Okay, you are young, so what? You may be young biologically, but old ideologically. So what use will you do for us? Because you can have a young person with archaic ideas, with ideas which are totally out of fashion. So it's not, yes, the biology is there, because of course you have got a longer time to stay here on earth. The old men and women will go to heaven much faster than you. That is if you look after yourself very well. But the ideas are ideas. If you have got wrong ideas, whether you are young or old, they are wrong ideas. If you have got right ideas, it doesn't matter whether you are young or old, they are useful ideas. Now, the minister from Brazzaville talked of the chaos in some parts of the continent. The wars, the terrorism. Wars are divided in two categories. Some wars are described as just wars. You cannot stand and say all wars are bad. No, some of the wars are just wars. They are justified. Like the anti-colonial wars. These were justified wars. We had no alternative but to fight. Because the Europeans had come here and colonized us. And they colonized us because of our internal weaknesses. That was also another topic for another day. They were able to conquer us because of our internal weaknesses. But eventually, we had to throw them out. Therefore, those wars were just wars. But they are also unjust wars. Unjust wars are two types. One type are wars of aggression. Like when the Europeans came to attack us here, what were they looking for? What legitimate reason were they looking for? Maybe they were looking for something, but it was something not legitimate. You can look for something which you should not be looking for. If they wanted natural resources to use, they should have come in order to trade. They should have come to our chiefs and say, okay, can we buy minerals from you? Instead of coming to grab. So the colonial wars were unjust wars, were wars of aggression. Now, if they are not colonial wars, but they are wars, for instance, tribal wars, how do you characterize those wars? Those are criminal wars, because they are not wars which are for legitimate reasons, and they shouldn't be there. But those criminal wars are propelled by a wrong ideology, a pseudo-ideology. This word pseudo, is it originally French or what? Is it there in French? Pseudo. P-S-E-U-D-O. Français? Huh? It's originally French. So, they are propelled by pseudo-ideology, a misdefinition of issues, a misdiagnosis of issues. How is one tribe in conflict with another tribe? If you study carefully, even before colonialism, the African tribes were, you find normally they specialize. Like here in this part of Africa, the tribes which are living in the forest, like the Congo forest, they would specialize in certain activities. Like the ones in Congo would specialize in copper products. They would make products called emiringa. I think emiringa was a combination of copper and something else, like brass, type of brass. They concentrate on animal products from the forest. And then the tribes from the savannah, who were mainly growing crops and also keeping cows, they would concentrate on agricultural products. And then the two would exchange. And you would find that they would really depend on each other, especially at a low level of technology. It was not possible to do hunting and at the same time do agriculture, and at the same time you couldn't manage. It was good that one specializes in something and the other one in something else, and then you exchange. That was the political economy of this area at that time. Therefore, the chiefs who were encouraging wars that time were wrong, because they were really interfering with the interests of the people. The people should have been left to trade, and the chiefs should have facilitated that. But some of them were not doing that. Instead, they were creating conflict. And it's that conflict that the colonialists exploited. Today, again, you find specializations of these different groups. Like my tribe in Uganda, they are mainly cattle keepers. They also grow crops like coffee, tea, bananas, and so on. Now you find that all the people in the area are doing the same activities. I keep cows, my neighbor keeps cows. I grow coffee, my neighbor grows coffee. I grow bananas, my neighbor grows bananas. Now, my neighbor cannot buy from me because I've got similar products, and I cannot buy from him. So we are stuck. If you leave us alone, we shall die of poverty. So, who helps us? The people of Kampala. They are the ones who buy our milk, who buy our beef, who buy, they don't buy much coffee. The coffee is bought by the international community, we export it. Now, if somebody comes and says, and tries to organize us to form a tribe organization, we form our tribe organization. Whose interest is he serving? Is he serving our interests? Because if we listen to him, we shall be acting against our own interests. Because our interests are that people from my region work with the people of Uganda to sell their products. Not only work with the people of Kampala, but also work with the people in Kigali. Because if you come to Kigali here, you will find products from Uganda here. Bananas and so on. South Sudan, Kenya, Tanzania, Eastern Congo. Now, those people who promote sectarianism, in whose interests are they doing it? Is it in the interest of the people, or is it in their own interest? So this is problem number one. And many of those wars you are talking about, part of the paralysis, part of the chaos is caused by this misdefinition of people's interests. Now, another strategic bottleneck, which we identified in this booklet, is the human resource development, education, and skills. This was part of the problem in the past. Our people were not educated during the colonial times. But now, African governments have paid more attention to education. The only question is, what type of education? It must be education that gives scientific skills, gives technical skills, gives managerial skills, and also some skills of understanding society, like social sciences. But the question is the proportion. If you have got too many people who just know when Napoleon invaded Russia, and there are too many of those, that will not help us to develop our country. Yes, we should have a few historians who know when Napoleon invaded Russia, and how he failed, and where he stood, and what he said. But we should have more people who know about science, about skills, about management skills. That has been another bottleneck. But fortunately, many African governments are now addressing that. Two more of the 10 bottlenecks which I would like to talk about now. Number one is what you touched on, the market. I've also touched on it already when I was talking about point number one. Our economies cannot grow, our businesses cannot grow if we do not have sufficiently big markets to buy what is produced in the factories. Therefore, our leaders were right from 1980 when they met in, I think it was Lagos, the Lagos Plan of Action, where they said we must integrate the African markets. That's how we formed this COMESA, ECOWAS, the market of Central Africa, and so on, and SADC later on. Now, that's very crucial. Because if we do not have a sufficiently big market, we cannot sell sufficiently, our enterprises cannot sell sufficiently, and if they don't sell sufficiently, they will not make profit, they will not expand, they will not create jobs. That employment you are talking about, the youth employment, must be linked with the expansion of the enterprises so that they can be able to create jobs. Yes, there is some unemployment in Europe, but our unemployment is more massive because even the ones who think they are employed, many of them are in what we call disguised unemployment. You find a lot of people in the villages, the grandfather is there, the father is there, the son is there, the grandson is there, they are all just there in the village. In 3 acres of land. And yet, those 3 acres just need 2 people to work on them. So the other 50 are redundant. This is what we mean by underdevelopment. Underdevelopment means underutilization of resources. If you have got 200 people in 1 acre, they are not fully utilized. We should leave a few people here to work these 3 acres, then the rest can go and do something else that will create more wealth. And remember, wealth is also measured. Like the same way as we measure weight, wealth is also measured. And we measure it by the measurement of GDP, gross domestic product, or GNP. If you look at the GDP of the African countries, they are small. Many of them are small. I think the biggest now they say is Nigeria. They have recalibrated and said Nigeria is now $500 billion. But a small country like South Korea is $1 trillion size of GDP. So the GDPs of the African economies countries are small because the factors of production are not fully utilized. The human resource is underutilized, the land for agriculture is underutilized, the minerals are underutilized, everything is producing below capacity. That's what we mean by underutilization. And that's why, therefore, you have got this social disequilibria. So many people without full-time work. That's why you can find in the villages in Uganda, somebody can just come and he comes to visit. What have you come to do? Say, I've come to see you. And just sits there for 3 weeks, eating, sleeping, because he has nothing. He's unemployed, and meanwhile he's eating. Now this is irrational organization of society. Development, among other things, involves rationalization of the way society is organized. Remove the irrationalities, increase the rationalities. Now, the final point I would like to talk about So therefore, market integration is a very important stimulus for economic growth, and therefore the solving of all these problems you are talking about, employment, what have you, the expanding the revenue base, independence. How do you get independent? You get independent by the government getting enough revenue. How do you get enough revenue? You get enough revenue by having enough items to tax. And how do you get enough items to tax? By expanding the tax base. And how do you expand the tax base? By expanding production. It is all linked. Now, finally, I would like to talk on infrastructure. For today, the other points are here in this booklet. If these people have got enough copies, or they can give it to the organizer, then they can multiply them. Infrastructure. Now, what is amazing about infrastructure is the lack of knowledge by the African civil servants especially. I think the civil servants are the biggest problem in Africa. Because civil servants are the ones who stay for long. These politicians come and go. So it should be the civil servants who should know what is required. There is a measurement called kilowatt hour per capita. Kilowatt hour per capita. That is the amount of electricity per person in society. If you go on the internet, you can get these figures. Kilowatt hour per capita. You go and look at it, you the youth. So that in addition to your biology, you also add ideas. If you go on the internet, you find that almost all the African countries, as of today, except for South Africa and Libya, before Gaddafi was killed by the Europeans, all these other African countries have got very low levels of kilowatt hour per capita. The United States has got a kilowatt hour per capita of about, I think it's like 14,000. Some of the African countries have got as low as 12. United States, 14,000. Some of the African countries have got as low as 12. Now, there's no way you can go beyond liberation, your theme, if you do not deal with the issue of electricity. Because electricity means factories. Factories means more wealth, more production, more jobs. Now, if you don't deal with that, you are not going to go far. The African economies have been growing. It is true they have been growing. They have no alternative but to grow, because if you have been at sea level, you must come up. And they have been growing fast, some of them. Like Uganda has been growing quite fast for these years. But before we solve the problem of electricity, the economy was growing all right, but growing in sectors that do not need electricity, like hair salons. You find so many hair salons in Kampala. They shape the hair this way of the women, then they shape it that way, then they twist it. Okay, that is growth, but it does not employ a lot of people. How many people are in the hair salon? There are maybe 5, 6 restaurants, things like transport, many minibuses. The whole of Kampala is full of them. Okay, that's growth, but it's not growth which is creating jobs. Real estate, a lot of houses. But the sectors which create jobs, which is what you are talking about, is manufacturing. If you look at a textile industry, how many people does it employ? It would employ definitely more people. These are the issues you should go into, you the youth. Which are the sectors that will create more jobs? Manufacturing versus services. China is able to employ those millions because of manufacturing, not because of hair salons and a few restaurants and casinos and all this. Now, that is electricity. So the electricity must be, and also when you hear these African technocrats speaking, you feel embarrassed because you can see they don't know what they are talking about. They say, you know, there's a lot of potential of electricity in Africa. Where is the potential? The hydro power potential in Africa is not much. The total, if you take all the rivers of Africa, the total potential is about 350,000 megawatts. If you take the Congo has got the biggest, Congo, Kinshasa, and Ethiopia is the next. The rest is not so much, but the total is about 350,000 megawatts from hydro. But United States alone uses 1 million megawatts of electricity. So when you hear Africans talking about the big potential of hydro, you know they don't know what they are talking about, because they don't know what is required. But there are other sources of energy. There is the coal. It's not clean energy, but it's there. Nuclear energy. Fortunately, we have got a lot of uranium. That's a much bigger source of potential electricity than hydro. And later on, if solar energy becomes cheap, solar energy, of course, is the best form of energy, but it is still expensive. That is still a problem. Now, finally, on the issue of infrastructure, you look at the railway and the roads. Africa, we don't have linkage from east to west, from south to north. No linkage. The only linkage we have now is by air. But you know, air is very expensive. You cannot transport a lot of goods by air. So that's why in East Africa, we are now working together to see how we can solve the problem of infrastructure. And when you solve the problem of infrastructure, what happens? You have lower costs of electricity, lower costs of transport, and therefore the business people can do business better. Because if the transport costs are high, electricity costs are high, the business people will not be able to make profit because the costs are too high. And if they don't make profit, their businesses cannot expand. And if their business cannot expand, they cannot employ you the youth, the youth who want jobs. So electricity means jobs for the youth. Railway means jobs for the youth. The roads are good, of course, but they are not as efficient in cutting costs as the railway and electricity and water transport. Water transport and rail transport are the cheapest forms of transport. So therefore, the youth movement should be the one on the forefront fighting for these points I'm talking about. But sometimes you find the youth Like in Uganda, I sometimes see the youth opposing some of these projects. They don't know that they are committing suicide without knowing it. With these few words, I thank you for inviting me. I speak a lot. If you invite me, you do so at your own risk. So I better restrain myself and end here. I thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. So in the interest of time, I'm going to begin by going to the floor. Would anyone like to ask a question? Okay, please remember that we have about 20 minutes left. One question, not two. If it's a comment, make it one comment and make it brief. Okay, thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Your Excellency. My name is Cyrus Ngusi from Rwanda. As an African, my question is, what is the relationship between liberation and Pan-Africanism? Thank you.
Sure. Yes, go ahead. I think we need a mic.
It is on? Okay. Yes. My name is Murai Tushimina from the DRC. I have one quick question and one request. You mentioned a lot of things, but you are looking at a room full of mature butterfly. So we're no longer the metamorphosis state. And you mentioned something about industries. Unfortunately, our industries in Africa are now represented by the youth because it's full of Mr. Smith, Benson, Van der Berg, or whatever. So as a head of state, how would you change that you really use the human capital that you have within your country? And my request is this. You managed to convene a summit, Afro-American summit in the United States. Would you be kind enough to convene another one, Pan-African leaders versus the youth that you see here, so we can actually continue the discussion about how you would handle the baton to some of us that are ready to take over the continent. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead. Can we get a microphone here at the front? There's one to your right, yes. Is it turned on? Thank you.
Thank you for your patience, all of you. My name is Alec Muhoho. I am based in Rwanda, Attitude Builders International. Your Excellency, thank you for your inspiring speech. I would like to ask a question that you mentioned about industry and infrastructure, and His Excellency the President of Rwanda yesterday mentioned about mindset change. I would want to know, you mentioned about the ideological problems in Africa, if this ideological problems is still a problem, because people in Africa are a bit tired of every time we are having the same old stories, same old conflicts that seem not to be ending, but on the other hand, there is development. So, Your Excellency, are you optimistic that we are moving on the right, as Africa as a continent, are we on the right direction in changing our mindset or addressing the issue of the ideology? Thank you once again.
Thank you. Yes, and a final question there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Herin from Kenya. I just want to say I'm excited at your speech, especially given that you've taken us to some of the core issues that we need to focus on, things like research, because I think beyond all the other talks, we have to equip ourselves to compete globally. And my persuasion is that as a leader, at that level, if we can take that talk and sustain that conversation, that we can have presidents inspiring young people to be able to focus on the sciences even as they do the other disciplines, because I think that's part of the gap, and it's because they have not been hearing people in high places persuade them to look into that direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, please.
And Pan-Africanism, are they the same thing? Now, of course, they are not the same thing, but they are linked. Liberation, because the countries were colonized, they were broken up into colonies. 54 of them. Uganda was under the British. Kenya was under the British. Congo was under the Belgians, and so on. So in Southern Africa, Zimbabwe was under the settlers, white settlers. South Africa was under the white settlers. Mozambique was under the Portuguese. Angola was under the Portuguese. So when we were fighting, we had to fight the local colonialist. You had to have the liberation movement according to the local situation there. But although this is a long topic, we don't have time. But we succeeded because we coordinated. We coordinated not only among ourselves, but even with the people from Asia. That's why, for instance, China was supporting us, supporting our anti-colonial struggle. The Soviet Union was supporting us. So although the liberation movements were different according to each country, but there was coordination among us. And the mistake was that after liberation, we did not continue the coordination. We sort of relaxed. That's why the problem was. They are not the same, but they are linked. The young lady from DRC, she also talked of metamorphosis. I don't mean you metamorphosing now. Individually, I mean the social metamorphosis, the society. Society must metamorphose. We must, for instance, when my father sent me to school, now all the people in my family have gone to school. I think my father was the last traditional person. We are all now middle-class people. That's what I mean. I mean the social metamorphosis of society, not just you metamorphosing from youth to mother and all that. That's a micro metamorphosis, but I'm talking about the societal metamorphosis. Now, but she also talked about the industries manned by foreigners. I think you should be very careful. I wish I had my chat here. I normally, I don't use the computer, but I like to use the blackboard. You see, first of all, before you quarrel about who is manning which industry, you must first of all look at the size of our economy. How many industries are there? In Uganda, there's a group called the Uganda Manufacturers Association. Sometimes they invite me for their dinner. But when I was last there, I asked them, I said, how many members do you have here? They said they had 700 members, meaning manufacturers. If you go to United Kingdom, there's what they call the British Confederation of Industries. When I went there, I asked them, I said, how many members do you have? They told me they had 55,000 members. Now, that represents, each one of those represents a factory. Now, before you quarrel about who is manning factory A, factory B, let's first solve the question of bringing in as many factories as possible, as many factories, as many hotels, as many as possible. That's how China has managed, by the way. When you hear that China has grown, it has attracted a lot of these external money. Yes, you can put there some, once you are attractive, once people are rushing to come to your, by dealing with the roads, dealing with the electricity, dealing with the railway, your country becomes attractive. People start rushing there to come, and because they want to make profit. And when they come, you can put conditions for them. Say, okay, you employ more Ugandans now. So that instead of having too many whites, you have more. But this comes later. The first thing is to make yourself attractive, so that you attract people to come in, and also you retain your own people. But I would want to caution, don't start quarreling about the who before you solve the what. What is to be done? Now, the mindset change. Somebody said, do we still have, there are two issues. One is ideological confusion. The one I talked about of, for instance, why are there sectarian conflicts? These sectarian conflicts are wrong because, as I described, they are not correct. But even if you solve the sectarian conflicts, then there's another problem of mindset. Let me give the example of Uganda. Uganda now has got a population of 37 million people. Now, if you assume that there are 5 people in each family, that should mean that there are 7 million families, at least. 7 million plus. Now, many of these families have land. Uganda has got very good land, very fertile. They have land. But if you go to the registrar of companies, somebody who registers companies, if you start a company, you go and register it. You go there and you ask him, how many companies have you registered? When I last checked, he had registered 160,000 companies. Now, that means that's much less than 1 million. That means many of the families have not started any business. They're just there. They have land, but they have not studied a business of how to use the land to make money. Now, that's the mindset change we are talking about. In French, there's what they call, I learned a few French words about 52 years ago. Now, one of the words I liked most was dolmil. Dolmil. Is it dolmil? Yeah. Now, many people in Uganda are definitely dolmil. And this is the mindset change I think President Kagame was talking about. There are the ideological problems, but even where there are no ideological problems, there are mindset problems. To know that in a modern society, you need food. What do they call food in French? Okay, let's say chakula. But you also need money you also need money. And how can you use your assets to generate money? Many of the families in Uganda are still there. And it's a struggle. We are talking about it. According to the census of 2002, only 32% of the homesteads in Uganda were in the money economy. The other 68% were in what they call subsistence economy. How do they say this in French? Subsistence economy. Huh?
Subsistance.
Agriculture, subsistence economy, agriculture.
Subsistance, right? Economie de subsistance.
Huh?
Économie de subsistance.
Agriculture, subsistence, agriculture.
Agriculture de subsistance.
When you go back to your country, this is the biggest disease. How many people in your country are in agriculture because that means they are not part of the modern economy. And they are a burden to themselves, but also to the country, because they are not producing. And yet they want services. They want medical care. They want roads. So where do they come from if you are not part of the production? That means they are depending on the 32% are the ones producing for this 68%. The other ones are dole meal. So, are we on the right direction? Africa is not uniform. In some areas, performance is good. Like in Southern Africa, there is now there are no wars in Southern Africa. In 1970, there were a lot of wars in Southern Africa, in Mozambique, in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, in Angola. But now these wars have shifted. They are no longer, Southern Africa is peaceful, except Madagascar, the one which had some problems some time ago. These wars have now shifted to other parts of Africa. So it is a mixed story. There is progress, but there are also problems. I thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And now I'd like to turn it over to the chairperson of Umurinzi, Eddie Sebera, for some final thoughts before we end this session.
Thank you once again, Mr. President, for giving us this opportunity to have you here with us and discuss about Africa, the challenges, the issues that we face as a youth, but also the future that we believe could be of what we think Africa could be if we put more of our contribution toward different policies that will be implemented in the future. However, looking at the discussion we had in the last 2 days, we had some great ideas, good interaction, and which came from different parts of Africa, from the discussion we had with the participant here. On my side, I have one request. As one of the head of state we have today here with us, is to ask you, since we talked about the issues, the problems that we face, and we believe that we could bring some contribution. So now the next question that I have in mind is, and I even asked and shared with our colleagues here, is what next? Yes, we as the youth, we pledged to go to the next level, which is trying to implement what we've discussed here. But we need this audience, this kind of interaction and conference to be ongoing. So the request is, please allow us to have the next session in your country as the host, and we will be very grateful for that. Thank you.
I forgot to respond to that. You will be most welcome to come to Uganda, and we shall host this meeting. That's one point, so you will be most welcome. And I like the youth, because when we started our activities, we were young, just like you. I started being active when I was just 18, actually. When I was 18 years old, that's when I started being active. Much of the work, we did it when we were young. So I'm very happy to see you taking interest. That's already a very good sign, and we shall definitely welcome you to Uganda. Our minister is not here, but the minister of the youth. There is an elderly minister who is here, of foreign affairs. But we shall follow it up very much. We welcome you. Now, earlier on, somebody had asked me, had said that he heard that I was the one who asked Obama to call the Africa USA meeting. It's true that I have been advising the American presidents to call this meeting. I talked to President Bush Jr. when he was there, and later on I talked to some of the Mr. Obama's people. Because we had had the same meeting with China, you know, we had had a summit with China. We have had several summits with Japan, 5 of them, TICAD, called TICAD. We have had several summits with the European Union, and we even had a summit with Turkey, Africa with Turkey. We had a summit with India, Afro-India Summit, and with the European Union, we have had a number of them. And you know, there are 44 million relatives of yours in the United States. Do you know those relatives? Even Obama is one of them. So, I didn't see why we should not link up with these people of ours. Unfortunately, the African Union now has created the 6th region. There are now 6 regions in the African Union. And the 6th region is the diaspora, the African diaspora. These are the black people in the United States, in the Caribbean, in South America, in Brazil. That Brazil you are watching on the television is full of black people. I don't know how many there are. There are very many there. So, yes, the American government sometimes does their own thing, but we have our people there. So it's important that we see how to link up with them. And this was one way. If you have the whole summit and we are all there, we can see how to work together. It is true that I suggested it. I'm not the one who called it, but I have been telling them. But we should continue with our own summits. We don't have to worry about the Obama summits. Those are additional. These ones are more important. These are ours.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. It's been a real pleasure having you here. Would everybody like to join me in another round of applause? Mr. President, thank you.